I'm going to take you through a game played in the 3rd and 4th place playoff match between Daniel Dubov and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. This is great fun. Stick around. Now, before we look at the game, just a couple of announcements for you. First of all, let's just clear up the Game of the Year 2020 poll. So decided by you, the viewers. There were 1,307 votes. And the winner is Daniel Dubov for his spectacular win over Sergei Karyakin. And he scored 50% of the votes. In second place, Alexei Shirov with 19% of the votes. So, well, a really convincing victory for Daniel Dubov. Of course, it was a spectacular game. I think there is a certain recency bias, as one of the viewers mentioned on the channel. You know, he's very much the man of the moment, so I'm not surprised that he got so much support. I think it's a worthy game, it's a spectacular game, but I tell you, my game of the year, the one that I wanted, didn't even make the final. And that was Anish Giri against Yan Nishi, which I thought was so interesting in every phase of the game, opening, middle game and end game. But listen, it's your choice. I'm not going to go to the House of Lords. Now, the second thing is, you can probably just see it here. A t-shirt arrived today. There you go. It's peeping over the top with my Octopus Knight design. Well, it's not my design. We had it specially commissioned and I'm really pleased with it. I think it's great fun. And the design is on the back as well, much larger. If you're interested in getting t-shirts and hoodies and mugs, actually, with this design and also the split rooks as well, then do check out the PowerPlay shop on teespring.com. You'll find the link in the video description down there. And, well, check it out. I really like the designs and help support the channel as well. So let's have a look at this game, finally. So, the 3rd and 4th place playoff between Dubov and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Frankly, I thought this was far more interesting than the match between Levon Aronian and Timur Rajabov, which was very tense, but this was really spectacular. Dubov won the first 2 games, so he only needed a draw from this game or the 4th game to win the set. So it's a bishop b5 check, and it's interesting to see how Dubov plays this. A lot of people play bishop b5 check as a kind of safety first opening, but Dubov goes for it. And when I played the bishop b5 check line, this is how I used to play this. I've played this exact pawn sacrifice about 40 years ago, actually. And it's great fun because white is developed. You've got your rook here. Black is struggling to develop and has some threats to deal with, basically. I remember one of my opponents played bishop d5 here. That's not bad. Maxime went for bishop g6. That allows d5. And you can see that with the pawn on d5, e6 has been prevented. That just gets taken. So how exactly does black develop the king side? Well, Maxime intended castling queen side, but that is pretty risky considering that these pieces will take a long time to meet up with the rest of the black's army, basically. And Dubov doesn't need to be asked twice. Bang! b4. And already I think white has a really nice attacking position here. Now, Maxime declined to take this pawn. Well, white would just carry on. Instead, he thought, okay, time to develop. And knight c4 is a very tempting move, threatening a big, juicy check on b6. Could turn into an octopus knight. Not quite, but anyway. And my computer here thinks that black should actually take here and give up the exchange. But, I mean, white, I think, still has a wonderful initiative there. But queen b5. Stops knight b6, knight d2. And now e takes d5 from Maxime. So it's 2 pawns, but white's initiative is absolutely huge. a4. The queen drops back. Couldn't go back to d7, of course, because of knight b6. But on c6, then that allows white to open more lines with another pawn sacrifice. So now it's 3 pawns. Black is 3 pawns up, but that A file is open, and well, it almost looks like an open goal here for white. And here, I think understandably, Dubov just goes for it. He just plays queen f3 and gives up a piece. In fact, he didn't need to be quite so gung-ho. He could have just exchanged here and put the knight back on e3 and kept going with the attack, but kept all his pieces. You can see this knight could well spin into d5. Queen f3 is coming anyway. And then, well, we've got the rook zipping down the a file. Basically, this is a tremendous position for white. But Dubov, well, he sensed that he could go for a quick kill here and played queen f3. Pawn takes knight. Bishop takes knight. And now Maxime blundered. My computer thinks that rook d7 is the best move here. I mean, it's the kind of move you would never make in a rapid play game. I mean, even in a classical game, it would be hard to make that move. Of course, you're going to take pieces. G takes f6. Rook a8 check. Rooks are exchanged. And thank you very much. Queen f6 check. The rook in the corner is in the bag. But I'd say that having got to this position, Maxime was probably relieved, because his king has found relative safety in the middle of the board. You know, there's a nice clump of pawns and the bishop protecting. That bishop is on a fantastic diagonal, and it is well supported. So how exactly does white make progress here? Well, Dubov, I think, made a very understandable move. He looked at this knight and thought, well, it hasn't really got many prospects on this square. The queen and the rook, of course, very active, but this knight is doing nothing. So he played the knight back to f1, and then it has possibilities maybe to come into e3 and look at c4 and d5, or perhaps g4. Could also come to g3 as well. In fact, there's an amazing move here, and that's h4, which solves the back rank problem. That knight might find a good square on f3, might come back to f1 as well. So solving the back rank problem is obviously a good thing. If bishop takes pawn, then queen e8, thank you. Queen drops. And this could be a very annoying little push. But actually, black is very short of moves here. It's really interesting. And if bishop f5, just h5. And if h5, incredibly, this is a really strong move. The king is safe enough. The knight can always protect it. And in the meantime, we're just going to storm a pawn down the board. Very interesting move. h4, best move. Knight f1 gives black a little chance. It's not easy. Queen b6, a very, very neat move from Maxime. It took him 2 minutes to find that one, but it was time well invested. Basically, he just wants to trade pieces. So if knight e3, for example, then just queen d8. And then with the 2 bishops and that mass of pawns, life is not so clear. So let's go back here. Queen b6 just played. Queen a8. Right, Dubov senses, want to keep the queen on the board. There could be a check here, but basically it just keeps the queen active. Queen a6. Okay. Dubov thinks, right, don't want to exchange queens. Queen comes back to h8. So maybe he's been thwarted a little bit there. And Maxime decides, okay, time to advance the pawn. Wow, that's really going for it. Knight e3 looks very reasonable. That knight looks really menacing. I'm surprised that Maxime actually pushed b5 and didn't repeat. I mean, maybe Dubov would have played something else, but this is playing b5 is a really risky move. But there we go. That's the point. Queen c8. He wants to exchange queens. Could still avoid a queen exchange with queen g7. No, actually not. No, queen f8 actually. Now that I look at it again, actually forces an exchange of queens. So no, that's now forced. But Dubov actually gets a pawn back like this. If pawn takes, then rook takes bishop. Well, having got rid of one of the bishops, actually White should just be winning that position, particularly with the king cut off on the 7th. So, having got a pawn back, things still look pretty nice for White. King d8, that avoids a check on b6. Now here, Dubov needs to move the knight. Where does it go? Should it go back to e3 and potentially in here? Well, he decides to play knight a3. He wants the initiative. He wants to break up these pawns, which I think is very understandable, because he realizes if bishop d3, that doesn't work, then that upsets the defense. So after knight a3, black has to play b4. So he's thinking, great, I've split these pawns. The knight is still active. Could be a good chance to bag that pawn with the rook and knight combining. King d7 played by Maxime. I think he needs to try and bring that king into the game. And here, well, it doesn't look like it, but White is actually in real danger. f3 played in order to bring the king into the game, and that is a massive mistake. Very hard to appreciate why. In fact, rook c1 was a good move, and that slows the king's progress down. The king is not going to step into this line. Best move is actually bishop d8 to just take that square away from the knight. If b3, this is an interesting one. With a couple of very tricky little steps, White actually picks up that pawn. Bishop c2, and now knight d2 is a tremendous move. Covers b1 so that bishop can be taken if the pawn advances. And if bishop f6, then rook f3 attacks the bishop and threatens the pawn, and White actually wins. These are the kind of really delicate steps that are impossible to calculate when you're short of time. You simply have to play on instinct. And f3 played by Dubov instead. And here b3 is actually winning for black. Dubov tries to bring the king over, but those bishops, wow, raking across the board. Those laser beams absolutely deadly, supporting the pawn, and there is nothing for White here. Bishop threatening to come down, exchange off the knight, and then the pawn goes home. Dubov tried knight e4, but now it's really easy. Obviously rook takes the pawn queens, and pawn takes bishop g5, threatening bishop c1. Bishop c1 comes anyway, locking in the rook, and that is game over. So basically now they're playing a king and pawn endgame with equal pawns, but actually it's a king and pawn endgame where that bishop controls some key squares in White's position, and very quickly Maxime can achieve a Zugzwang. Let's just see there, the king reaches its best square. You can see because the bishop controls e3. The king cannot step across, so has run out of moves. So g3 now. Just a couple of delicate steps for black. f6, and that is a Zugzwang position. Basically, whatever white plays now, it's hopeless. So, for example, if g4, h4, and the king has to let go of the pawn. h4 played by Dubov. But now the pawns are fatally weakened. A gentle exchange, and the king marches in to just clean up the remaining pawns. And the h-pawn flies home. Wow, what an amazing game, an absolute roller coaster. And in fact, Maxime went on to win game 4. So they're all decisive games, 2-2 in that first set. So they play again tomorrow. It's going to be great fun. As I said, Aronian against Radjabov, very, very tense. Radjabov won the final game, so he takes the first set, and he's looking good. I have to say, he is such a practical player. He's brilliant at rapid play, as we saw in the World Cup in 2019 when he won. There we go. Thanks for watching.